Reexamining Your Ethical Leadership will be presented by Claire Peace, HR Business Partner at Certipay and Venture. Ethical leadership is important today, particularly because of the many recent scandals in corporate America and the political realm. So having strong leadership and ethics in the hospitality industry is crucial to help you model moral behavior in the workplace when you are in a position of power. Integrity, moral behavior, and ethics are key to being a great leader. So how do you know you are an ethical leader? We hope you had time to complete the Ethical Leadership Style Questionnaire, which gave you an opportunity to self-report and measure your ethical leadership. I'll go ahead and post the link to the questionnaire in the chat again for those of you who do not have it readily available or maybe who have not had time to do it just yet. During this discussion, Claire will reference the questionnaire and call on those to share their insights on their ethical leadership styles, so be prepared. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Claire, and I will again go ahead and post that link in the chat.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, and Connie too, for helping out. Well, welcome everyone, and I hope you're ready to identify who you are as an ethical leader. This is one of my favorite subjects because 20 years ago, the first thesis I wrote was ethics in the workplace. And then I went back 20 years later and went back to another master's in organizational leadership 3 years ago and really dived into what the power of leadership is. And believe it or not, this area of ethical leadership is still being researched, is still being examined by many scholars. That is something that many corporations are even implementing more, as we're going to talk about that. But today we're going to examine what those characteristics are. And I hope that many of you took that exam, kind of the questionnaire, little exam. Today you are my students, I'll be your teacher. And we're going to learn a little bit about who you are and how you perform in the workplace. So we're going to get started. I always love to tell you, what is leadership? Everyone has a different mindset of what leadership is, right? And you have to understand that leadership is a process. No matter what you do, it is going to be a process. It involves you influencing others. It occurs in group. You can't do it by yourself. You have to have your followers with you. And it involves a common goal. So those things are really important to understand because you are all working for the hospitality industry. And I know you're not there for just working for one person. You work for the board, the stakeholders are the board of directors, your members, your staff, and everyone else in the management team. That is your group and your stakeholders. So you are of power. Remember, just because you have that power doesn't mean that you can constrict things and people from doing things. So we're going to look at how you can be a better leader. Let's talk about that because there's managers, we know that, and there's leaders. And one of my favorite workshops is distinguishing what's a leader and what's a manager. So let's go a little bit about one of my favorite authors was Robert Greenleaf in 1970. He is probably the master of discovering what servant leadership is. And what Greenleaf said, he says he wants, servant leader is serving others, understanding how to serve others. Well, that's what you do in the hospitality industry. You do that every single day. You serve others. Like I mentioned, you serve the board of directors, you serve the members, you serve your guests, you serve your staff. This is what a servant leader is. And I love what Greenleaf had talked about. He uses the importance of those characteristics are all combined into being a great listener, right? Having empathy as well too. Being aware of your own, really your own behaviors and how you model yourself in the workplace. Being a good steward, helping others identify where their needs are. It's not just coming to work every single day and just, do the same thing. Learn a little bit more about who you work with. Get to know their behaviors so you can be a better leader as well too. And it's a commitment to the growth of the organization, to the growth of the people who you work with, the growth of your community. You're in this wonderful communities that you're helping out. Many of you are at clubs, some of you are at resorts or hotels. No matter where you're at, you're there to help out the community. by staffing the right people, retaining them, by bringing in the right staff that can help you grow. And these are your followers. So if you ever get a chance, and I would tell you, if you want to learn a little bit about what servant leadership is, dive into what Robert Greenleaf says about. And that's one of the books that I would, actually want to propose to read next time around. So we're going to dive into what's an ethical leader. And did everyone, and I know that many of you who completed the questionnaire and some of the questions that I sent out, were you surprised, not surprised? And we're going to get into that. But I went back and I said, what is a leadership? It's a process, right? Leadership is a process, it's reaching a common goal. Well, ethical leadership now stands a little bit above that, right? It is directed by respect for ethical beliefs and values, for the dignity and rights of others. It is a concept of trust, honesty, consideration, charisma, and fairness. And this was in Wikipedia. You can pull this up right off. I'm going to reference, and throughout my slides, I'm going to reference to where I find the information. I use a lot of the MLA information so you can see where the research is coming from. So therefore, you can go back with your team and do some fun things about ethical leadership. You will be very surprised, I will tell you that. So a little bit about that ethical leadership, right? It's the beliefs and values, the dignity, the rights of others. I want to emphasize on that trust, honesty, consideration. When Greenleaf talked about that, he was talking about combining all of that and adding empathy, awareness. And, he had the honesty on there, but he also conceptualized on a lot on the, I think more on the healing part of making sure that you understood who you are as an individual and how your behavior affects others as well too. So ethical leadership, again, it's right about respecting others. If you cannot respect others in your workplace, you will have dilemma, you will have chaos. You were serving others. And I go back to what Greenleaf said as well too, being a servant leader to your community, to the people whom you work with, to your friends, to your family. Those are things that are important in there. Showing justice. And what does that mean by showing justice? I mean, it's being honest, being fair, being aware, and manifesting that honesty. So when we were kids, remember your parents would always say, you got to tell the truth, Johnny, you have to tell the truth, because the more you're told what to do, the more you create that awareness and you start creating that role model. And as children, your parents were telling you, did you tell the truth? Johnny, did you do your homework? And believe me, as a parent, I went through this with 4 of them. So I was always asking, did you guys do your homework? Oh yeah, Mom, we did. And then the next day I find out that the teacher was, calling me because one of the kids, and I'm not going to say her name, but I'm sure she knows who I'm referring to, will come back and said, hey, she has not done the homework for a whole week. And I'm thinking, why would you lie? So we try to draw that upon our own children. We were as children ourselves, our parents always tell us, tell the truth, that honesty. And what was being built upon us was that role model, to be those great role models as adults now, that we can incorporate all of these traits: respect, serving, justice, honesty, and building your community. And it's so interesting. Many of you do not realize that you are in the community to serve others. That's what it is. So again, building that community is kind of like an endpoint to where you're at, by starting all over with the right staff. Does that make sense to everyone? Raise your hand. Does it not make sense? Any questions on that so far? I can only see a few there. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're going to move on a little bit. So I had, we talked a little bit about, why does the ethical collapse happen? We all went through that we saw what Enron, I was involved with the situation. I worked for RSM McLadrin Pullen back then, 1999, 2003, the SOX law went into place, and it was all a result of the Enron Arthur Andersen situation. But don't get me wrong, there was other companies that were right behind them, Adelphia, Baptist Hospital, many organizations that I can name went through the ethical collapse. And why did it happen? And I know, when I was actually, another wonderful book that I would encourage you to read are the 7 Signs of Ethical Collapse. It's a great book. It talks about why it happened, why all of these companies, they knew about it, but they didn't do anything about it. And I hope that in your workplace, that if you see something that's unethical, that you will stand up. And sometimes, I'll tell you, sometimes that's hard. I know that is hard, because at times you're put in positions that you just don't know what to do. It can cost you your job. But I always say, and I know as a consultant, I've been doing this for 20 years, I have run into clients that have asked me to not to really to hide an audit from discovery, and I just can't do that, and I walk away from that client because my reputation stands it. And I always say, my parents always said, be careful, careful who you hang out with, or careful what you do. It's about your reputation. So I'd rather lose a client than lose my reputation and what I stand for as well too. So I know that many times you will fall into situations that may not be happy situations, not be great situations. It will happen. I guarantee it. I have been seeing it for many years, and it's unfortunate. It doesn't matter how many degrees, PhDs you have. If you are hiding things, you're being unethical, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And then what happened was that, these managers, CEOs, C-suites, they saw they saw the bright light out there, but they didn't want to turn around and admit to fault or what's right or wrong. Sometimes they were fearful if they said something that will cost their jobs. But they were obsessed also with the numbers that they were going after, and that happens a lot in sales too. And no one, sometimes people just forgot that that power in their position. They thought they had the power and they could do it whatever they want to. We saw it in the loaning industry, in the banking industry, loans and banks. We saw it in what happened when Arthur Andersen didn't disclose the information. We've seen it. You have those stories. But like I said, if we start off, and I'll tell you what I did when I first wrote my first thesis was ethics in the workplace. I said, if we can go back to the schools and teach these children about ethics in the workplace and prepare them to come into the workplace with high ethical values, we can start changing some of that. I haven't seen it. 20 years later, I still haven't seen it, which is sad. But that's a culture that you're breeding, and you're breeding good things. I hope that's what if you have children, that's what you're telling them every day, about being honest, of being fair, of being ethical, of doing the right thing, of understanding what is right or wrong. So the unethical violations that these corporations cost billions, and that billions of dollars, which many end up closing, the violations were incredible. So anyway, I encourage you to read this book if you want to really dive into what those costs are as well too, because it can be interesting as well too. Any questions so far? All right, I'm going to move on. And here's some of the reasons why, what caused this ethical collapse in the corporations. And I know many of you have been pressured to maintain those numbers. I see that from the finance side. You've got to get those numbers in. We have to meet budget. We have to do this. We only have this window. And just be careful too, especially on the payroll side, because I do the payroll audits many times, and you start seeing numbers that just doesn't make any sense. For example, overtime or misclassification of a position that should be hourly, and instead they're setting it up as salary, so they're avoiding all the overtime under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And at the end of the day, you will get caught because someone will file a complaint with the Department of Labor, and that complaint is going to end up in, at your knock. Someone's going to be knocking your door with a subpoena for those records, and you have to provide all the payroll records. That you can't hide, and we will never hide. I've been involved with many overtime violations of clients, and we've had to share the information, and whether they liked it or not, we have to share that because we're being subpoenaed for those records as well too, to make sure that we've implemented those things. But those are things you come across, the payroll, the fear and silence, that if you stay silent, and hide in your office, in the closet, then no one will find you. You will be found, believe me. Then there's those big life CEOs that, you walk by and they say, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Always be mindful of what's going on in especially if all of you are working in finance, you know what those numbers mean. Sometimes you have a weak board that wouldn't stand up for the costs, or there are conflicts with others as well too, that they might set up the standards that if you filed a complaint, your position will be over. Well, there's always another opportunity better, and those companies will have karma. I always say karma is bad. So there's the evil in others, which become very destructive in the workplace, and those leaders that become destructive end up costing the organizations millions and millions of dollars because of their unethical practices. And that's why a lot of these corporations end up collapsing. I mean, that's why. But think about a lot of those and what creates that in your own workplace. How many of you, and I don't want to know what it was, how many of you have been in the forefront of an unethical situation? Raise your hand.
Raise your hand or go ahead and chat in the chat box, say yes or no, just so we can kind of get an idea.
Don't tell me the organization, don't want to know.
Yep. Just yes or no. There you go. Yeah. All right, Claire, they're coming in both directions, so you can kind of see.
And it's tough. It's very tough. So I'm going to point out to Jim Schiff. What did you do? How did you handle it? Don't tell me the organization.
Let's see. I would say, let's just say it was an instance where I was asked to sign off on something that was not just immoral, but illegal. And I actually left the job that day.
I'm going to give you the thumbs up, man. That's wonderful. How about you, Scott? Scott Boren. No names.
Yeah. Similar to Jim, I was put in a position where they were moving a lot of things around to try and make a property look better to an investor, and it was not correct, and we did part ways as well.
Anyone else like to share their story? All right. I've seen it in payroll. I have seen it in I-9s, now that especially Florida now has to have the E-Verify for those that are here in Florida. I have seen that. It's tough. It's very difficult. But again, it will catch up to you. I will tell you that. And I'm honored that the both of you walked away from that organization, because I know that you are in a happy place now, that your mind is clear no matter what. You can offer $1 million to shut up, and it's not going to help, because you will not be able to sleep at night. It will haunt you to the day you pass away. That will happen. And it's things that what cost a lot of these organizations is that no one spoke up. And those that did, of course, the Whistleblower Act went into place as well too later on. Thank goodness that those before the Whistleblower Act went into place, they couldn't say anything. They didn't know where to turn to. Well, we had the SOX laws that went into place and the Whistleblower Acts that went into place. Those are important. How many of you have the whistleblower policy in place? Raise of hands. I see a few, but can't see all of it.
We're
Brittany,
at,
do you see a lot?
yep, we're at 15, 16, 17. We're still going. Here we go. Just introduced it. Bernadette, honestly not sure. There's some that said no, but it looks like majority said yes, Claire.
Go back to your handbooks. I would encourage you and look at what you have in there. And if I know most of you have hope you have a complaint procedure. Most of the harassment policies should have a complaint procedure, and you should also, in addition to that, have a whistleblower policy in place. Because when you have it in place, and there's posters for that as well. You can post in the lounge, in the employee lounge, throughout the offices. It creates awareness. It creates a message. It tells a message that says, hey, we want you to tell us if something's not right. It's okay. But in order for you to create that awareness, to create that I'm okay to file a complaint, just yesterday I had a one of the accountants working in a club who confidentially said, I think a manager is playing favoritism with food and beverage. He's giving more hours because she's running the payroll. He's giving more hours to this group that came in from from an agency rather than the current employees. So I ended up calling him out, and he says, no. As a matter of fact, we're going into season, and what she doesn't know is that out of the 3 that she was referring to that thought he was playing a little bit favoritism, 2 of them are going on vacation, and I'm starting to build up their hours for a season. So I'm glad that was a good reason, but someone was looking at it. So everyone, like I said, if you try to hide something, someone's always going to be looking at it. And I'm glad that she was comfortable to come to me and let me know so I can approach it and make sure that, everyone's being treated fairly. I think that's what you want as a leader, that everyone's being treated fairly. So any questions so far on any of those? Okay. So, what causes a person to act unethical? I'll tell you that the dark side of leadership is that destructive leader that doesn't want and doesn't care. And I said earlier, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, PhDs you have, it doesn't matter. And if you are not performing ethically in the workplace, your staff will see right through you. You are walking that path. And I always say, to understand where you're at, clear that path, remove the obstacles, remove the clutter, and really look at what's going on in the workplace and ask questions as well too. It's okay. That, to have that destructive behavior, it does affect the organization. It loses the trust, the integrity of others. This person that's acting destructively is just an arrogant person, is narcissistic, self-absorbed in their own self, and wants the attention all to themselves. And it could be someone or something that you've done absolutely wonderful, and you brought it up to that individual, your top leader, and they take it to the board and take all the credit. How many times has that happened to you? That someone else takes the credit for something that you did. And how does that feel?
We have a few. If you guys want to go ahead and raise your hand, see.
How does that feel when you've done everything to make that organization successful and you have this great idea? I'm, always thinking outside the box, and you brought it up to your manager, to your leader, and they took all the credit. Yes.
Lots of hand raises and a lot of comments of lots of times, many times.
Yeah. And that's, unfortunately, that's a destructive leader. That's the type of person that will cause the organization turnover, potential violations with the Department of Labor, with Homeland Security, with the IRS, who knows? But they will be knocking on his door or her door, whoever it is. But it is important. And I'll tell you, when you're in these situations, it's tough. It's tough to say, God, what do I do? What do I do? Do I go up to that and tell them? You have to be bold enough to want us to do that. You have to be bold enough. But I would say in this situation, use your best judgment. Use your best judgment, because every situation is so unique and different. I'm not going to encourage you to do anything unless you know where you're at the time. But unfortunately, that's what happens. So I had a question I sent out. It was actually a couple of questions. The one was the first one we talked about. And I wanted, out of everyone here, I want you to tell me, is a leader's choices influenced by their moral development, and why?
So if you want to go ahead, ponder that for just a few seconds and go ahead and drop your message in the chat, that would be great. And then also, Claire, we've got a few questions that I have holding. So whenever you want to find a good time to answer those, just let me know.
While they're going over this, let's dive into those. Those are great.
Okay, so we've got one from Grant. I appreciate the whistleblower process, but what happens when the process is abused and it is weaponized against a person or party?
Good question. A good question. And I did see that not too long ago, about a couple of years ago, about a year ago at a club. And I did see that. It's, there are attorneys that work on that, specifically on those types of policies. It has to be, so you have to have the policy in place, right? You have to have the policy in place in order to to file a complaint. That's what you have to do. If you find that there's an opportunity to file a complaint, that's one avenue, but it's very delicate. And can it cost you your job? And if it does cost you your job, well, that's a violation of that policy in place, because it's very specific, just like the harassment policy. The Supreme Court wrote that and said, hey, there's a complaint procedure. That complaint procedure needs to be followed by law. But if you retaliate, Mr. Manager, against that person who filed the complaint, then there will be potential violations and lawsuits as a result of that. So that's one avenue. Not something I always, influence you to do, but it is one avenue. It's difficult because you have to find the right, attorney that works on that specific type of employment law attorney. It has to be an employment law attorney, in other words. Okay. Hope that answered the question. I know it was kind of iffy because you have to be really careful how where you direct things.
And then while we let everyone, we have about 20 responses in, so we'll let others kind of keep thinking. But one more question we got from Roy was, I've been to sales pitches where things are being exaggerated. How do I find the line between an exaggeration being misleading?
Well, have you ever purchased a vehicle? I've seen her purchase a car. Boy, is it inflated! And I'll tell you, there's you have to call them out. Ask them for examples. Said, how did I always like to go back to Simon Sinek on the why. And so why do you ask them the why? Why do you think that this is or this amount, or if if it's inflated, ask them to give you true examples. Filing a complaint on that, I'm not sure how you're going to file a complaint, because it depends on the product and the subject matter.
Hey Claire, how you going? It's Roy. That
Roy.
was my question. It was actually the other way around, where I was in the pitch, and it was my boss who was representing things that I felt was not was a gross exaggeration. so I wasn't going to jump up in front of
Oh,
the
okay.
capital party that we were trying to sell to, but
No, I
wasn't quite
wouldn't.
sure what to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Did you approach, I'm just curious, did you approach him afterwards?
No,
No. Are you still there? Probably not, right?
it was a previous organization,
Yes, yes.
but it wasn't
Yeah.
like it wasn't a blatant lie. But I was sitting in the meeting thinking, this isn't quite true.
Yeah. Do you know how many companies have gotten themselves in trouble over those situations? I mean, there are laws in place for that. However, you're in front of your boss who's giving the sales pitch, and you're like, oh my God, is he lying through his teeth?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'll tell you, that's uncomfortable. I'm glad you walked away from it, and eventually it'll catch up. It'll catch up to them through either a customer or someone in there, someone who eventually will file a complaint. But it's tough. I know it is tough. It's a tough situation, and I'm glad you did the right thing, because you wouldn't, at that point you wouldn't call them out afterwards. Maybe just say, hey, was that the correct, or how should I do that? But good 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 segue into the next one. So did everyone have, is a leader's choices influenced by their moral development or not? Yes or no?
Everyone had a lot of yeses with some explanations. I don't know if you want to call on someone random, or maybe we have someone in the crowd who would like to raise their hand and share their answer. Any takers? Anyone? Oh, Grant. Thank you, Grant. Feel free to talk. We can't hear you. I don't know if you're talking. No,
No, we can't hear you.
can't hear you, Grant.
No. Anyone else would like to share that?
Marie, you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Sure.
Hi,
I think
Marie.
hi. I think I had the same answer as most everyone else. It's part of your moral foundation. But I also believe there's some people out there that just they don't have the same empathy built into them. And I also think that you can grow and learn how to have that moral foundation.
I love that, because we talked about how you're raised as a child earlier. I spoke about that, how you're raised as a child. Your environment plays such a big role in it. The leaders that you work with, if they're bad leaders, does that influence you to become a bad person as well too, or just think that, well, my boss is getting away with it, I might as well just play the game as well too. And it is a foundation. Anyone else?
Yeah, I found my unmute button.
Oh, okay. All right, Grant.
So to me, the moral development is at the end of the day, it is the line in the sand, and it is what we know to be right and wrong. If that development isn't well understood or well developed, then you don't know what's right or wrong. And then you start making decisions that you have no compass or direction to know whether that's morally, ethically, legally a good choice or not, right? And if you don't know, I mean, not that you're not accountable for those, but good people make bad decisions because they don't know any better sometimes, right? And that's where we get our influential choices that we make in our everyday lives as leaders.
And that's so true. And I love what you said. If you don't know, you don't know, right? You don't know what you know. And many times when I'm doing these workshops, especially with this, with managers, and I said, well, I'm gonna educate you today on what you should know, because if a violation does occur, you can't go back and tell the attorney or whoever you have to get in front of and say, well, I didn't know. I said, because now I already told you what you should know, whether it's doing a harassment workshop or preparing performance management, anything like that. But I always let them know. I said, I'm gonna educate you today on what you should know, because and then many of them say, right, I didn't know that. Well, I've been doing that for so long. I had no idea. I said, well, good thing that you didn't get yourself in trouble. So it is about sometimes about not knowing, also about the foundation. Anyone else before I highlight on it? We had some good, I think some good things. You know, we talked about, and I love also another scholar, Kohlberg, 6 stages of moral development. He's influenced by, you know, obedience and punishment. You have to know that if you obey, will there be, what consequences are there? None, probably. Also talked about the individualism and the exchange of how people have their own individual needs and upbringing. And I'll tell you, someone's behavior is influenced by someone else's behavior. That is definitely true. The interpersonal relationships that you have with others, I hope that each one of you has worked with a mentor, someone who has really influenced you to do things, to ask questions, to not be afraid of someone else who's in power, to walk away when you're being asked to do something that's wrong. Also, what's the influence? Also maintaining the social order of work and the social concepts. So we go through. I think what Kohlberg was saying on this was, is a leader's choice influenced by their moral development, and why? Yes, it is. It is by all of these factors, and how each one. Again, if you are a child, we're talking back as a child, and you're told, don't do this, and do this, and you continue to do this. You know, I grew up in Catholic schools. I remember those nuns used to hit us with a ruler. I'm going back and I'm thinking, gosh, no, they don't do that now, thank goodness. But that's how we were punished. So I remember, all right, I can't be doing that. I can't chew gum. I can't speak in class. But that influence dived into my life as a child, that I was almost afraid to even raise my hand. Sometimes they're good things and sometimes they're bad. So those punishments probably were not the best way to treat a child at that time. Now we know different as parents, right? So a lot of that universal principles about how you learn as well too, and the cultures that you develop in your workplace as well. I always encourage everyone to have mentors, especially if you have a good group of new supervisors, managers that are coming into the workplace. They don't know what they don't know. And if they don't know, well, how would they be able to perform? How would they be able to reach that level of expectations of your organization? And it's really by giving them the tools and the resources and being a really good mentor for them as well too. Any questions on Kohlberg's on here? All right. So one of the last questions we also had, what are the virtues of an ethical person?
You guys want to just, again, think about it and go ahead and drop your answers in the chat. Honest, integrity. I'll read some of them, Claire, while they come in. Someone you can depend on, empathy.
Like that.
Fairness, empathy, integrity again. Courage is a new one. Seeing a lot of honesty and fairness, justice, dependable, respected, transparency, moral compass, good character. A lot of honesty, empathy, fairness. That's what
I like the person who said transparency. Why did you say transparency? I'm curious.
See, that was Brett Connor. Are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Why transparency? I was curious.
I've dealt with many things at work where there's situations where we don't get the whole story, especially from people who I report to that are not on site, and I'm not getting everything. And when you don't get a whole story, you kind of kind of forced to ask questions and or make up what the whole story is, and that can lead to perceptions that are unethical.
Yep, yep. I love that you said that, and why I picked on you, because I'm always encouraging. I'm using that word. I use that word quite a bit with managers too, and I'm working with with clients, is about that transparency, because your staff and people can see right through you. And that's where a lot of going back to what happened to the collapse of the corporations, that unethical practice. They weren't transparent, they were hiding things. And at the end of the day, we're a story. We're a story to tell. That area is probably, to me, one of the most important things is just being transparent with my family, with my coworkers, with my clients. They know who I am. There's no secrets here. I mean, pretty much, sometimes I say I'm an open book, but you've got to be careful as well too. However, having that type of trait and virtue is super important. Someone else said courage. I know we talked a little bit about that. Why did you say courage? Thank you, Brett. Very nice, thank you.
I said courage because it's not easy to be forthright. It's not easy to sometimes take things that are difficult to face. It's not easy to make the right decision sometimes, but it's the old adage of not, what is it? It's easy things. Wait, what is it? It's like good things aren't easy and easy things aren't good necessarily, or whatever. It's something like that. But
Right.
It's tough, and you got to have managerial courage when you're in a leadership position.
Yes.
Because
yes.
people are depending on you to do the right thing, and it's easy to walk down the wrong path because
Yep.
it's easier.
Yep. And that dependability, because they are looking at you, that courage, and really in this having that confidence to be courageous as well too, standing in front of the lion. And that lion could be your board, or it could be the president of the company or the club. So standing in front of that lion and having that courage to stand up for what you believe and what you feel is correct. Sometimes, and it's like you said, sometimes it's hard. It's not hard. Not telling you any of this is easy. It's not easy for everyone, but at least you start realizing that a lot of these virtues are things that you can start or have already start using as part of your workplace. So let's find out what I found. And Mr. I call him Mr. Ethics was Aristotle. I mean, he was the father of defining what ethics was all about. And it's interesting because many of you already said, you said courage. That's why I kind of pointed to that. He says it demonstrates the virtues of courage, temperance, generosity, self-control, honesty, sociability, modesty, fairness, and justice. I heard all those words except sociability. I did not hear that, or unless someone used that one. That's the only one. Self-control was another one that I didn't hear as well too, because in order for you to be a really good leader, you have to, and things are going to be thrown in your face that you may not like it, and you cannot stand in there and scream and yell and say, well, this is wrong, I'm sorry, this is wrong, and I'm not going to do it. You have to have that self-control to learn how to do it and be courageous enough to hold that. Managers need to develop these areas. That's the fruit of your behaviors and where you're leading into, either by integrity, truthfulness, fidelity, benevolence, humility, all of that. And rather than telling, I was like, this is what I like about Peter Northhouse, this leadership book that was actually part of my second master's, was rather than telling people what to do, attention should be directed telling people what to be, or helping them to become more virtuous. So you're the role model, you have that. And what he's saying here is, rather than empower your staff to do the right thing. And when they don't do the right thing, have that self-control to be cognizant of why they didn't do it right. Was because they lacked the tools, the resources, the training. What was it? Instead of yelling and screaming and saying, well, you always do it wrong, or you're always late. No, be specific as to those things. And then again, go and find out how to help them to become better individuals. And again, our virtues are derived from our own actions, and our actions manifest our virtues. I mean, think about that. What we do every day as we walk down that road, it's people, you want your followers. You want to be that leader with your followers that know that you're walking in the right path, in the right direction, and not leading them to the swamp, right? Any questions so far?
I will say, I want to give a shout out to Heather. She did put self-control in the chat. So
Yes. Okay. I didn't see that. So those are wonderful. Thank you, Heather. So we dived into this earlier, and I sent everyone this questionnaire because I wanted you to actually just think about who you were. Ethics is not about being bad or good, right? I hope that you were surprised by your style, because when I took this test 3 years ago, mine was a little bit different. But 3 years later, I came back with duty ethics, right? And I said, but then I realized why I'm more duty ethics, because I, as a consultant, have to advise, right? I'm an advisor. And at the end of the day, whether a client does it the right way or the wrong way, right? I have to walk away from that. And I have to have that self-control to not get personally upset over it. I'm that advisor, but I may not agree with everything within the laws, right? But my background is compliance, so I may not agree, but I have to follow that law. And I think that this time around, I rated so much higher in the duty ethics than 3 years ago. It's a fun tool to use with your managers and supervisors. It's a great tool to do a discovery of the why. So what was the rating, Brittany?
Yep. Everyone's still kind of answering right now. I do have a poll up on the screen if you guys are not looking. Right now, duty ethics is ahead by far. So looks like a lot of people have that same ethical leadership style as you, Claire. We still have a few more coming in, and then I will end it. Please go ahead and get your answer in. This is the third question for your CPE credit. So we'll give everyone just a few more minutes. Bernadette said duty ethics. It looks like duty ethics is really going to just run the show here. Give me just a few minutes if people are still putting their answer in. Anyone else last minute? Oh, someone was tied. That's interesting. Let's see. Annalyn was tied. Ethical. All right, I'm ending it. I'm going to share it.
Wow.
Can you see it, Claire?
Yes. Wow. Justice, virtue, duty. What was by a raise of hands, was anyone surprised by your style?
No one was surprised. Anyone?
No, I was surprised. I was becoming more on the justice ethics, but then after you read deep into it, it's a whole different level.
Yeah, it looks like everyone in the chat is saying, no, not really, not surprised here. So I guess people know themselves pretty well.
Yeah. And it's a great little tool to use. I mean, there's a whole workshop on this, but if you just wanted to start off again with with the staff meeting, with your managers, and find out a little bit about their leadership style, doesn't mean it's bad or it's good. It's just that type of style. It does help understand a little bit more about who they are. And if you've ever taken the Myers-Briggs and if you take the Myers-Briggs, like, they say to take it every 5 years because it does change. And the culture that you work in does affect those answers as well too. So maybe a year from now, you might want to take it again and see, am I in the same realm? That's great. But use it as a tool to help you with your staff have a better understanding of how everyone's behavior is and why, right? So I hope you enjoy that a little bit. I'm going to recap on some of the things that we talked about. Any questions so far on the ethical leadership style?
And while you're recapping, if anyone wants to go ahead and throw a question in the chat, go for it, and we can definitely touch on those, Claire. So if you want to briefly reach, yep.
Okay, good. So just wrapping it up, I know we're almost out of time, right? So wrapping it up, I know there was a lot of good questions. I love your answers. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your thoughts. Again, put this into your everyday life about ethical leadership, respecting others, serving others, being a good servant leader, being there for them, being fair. When you see something, someone that's, the manager's playing favoritism, make sure that you encourage them that it's all about being fair and showing justice, honesty, being honest, transparent. I love what you said, Brett, before about the transparency, and building your community around you. Get involved, build your community of your staff, have fun with them, and be a good leader. That's what it's all about. There's so many different types. And again, ethical leadership is one that's still being researched by scholars. And if you've ever read more about authentic leaders and transformational leadership or servant leadership, they all have their different meanings and definitions and traits as well too. But again, I'm glad that you were able to take this last leadership quiz. So again, what ethical principles in the hospitality industry? Honesty, integrity, the fairness, the equity, respect for diversity. Implement that into your everyday life. The DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion is huge right now. We see it in all the corporations and every type of industry. Implement that into your policies, in your handbook, into the workplace. Be responsible, accountable. Let's say that accountability is important too, that people know. Confidentiality and privacy. I hope that you have that type of policy in place as well too, about maintaining confidentiality and privacy in the workplace, having an equal opportunity non-discrimination policy as well too, but following it as well. Staff development, empowering them to grow in their positions. What's their career opportunities? Work-life balance. We saw that more towards, when COVID, and people are still trying to get back to the full workplace. And I see that in non-clubs, but not more in different industries, how they're still struggling with that. I'm a big proponent of, maintaining a safe and healthy workplace, having all those processes in place to make sure that an employee, if they do have an injury or illness, that they feel comfortable and not retaliate against because they filed an injury or complaint in the workplace. Member, customer, guest safety and security. It's important that you have those security practices in place. Marketing and advertising practices. Someone said that their manager was, inflating the sales pitch. Well, don't inflate your marketing strategies either as well. And make sure that you're compliant with all the laws and regulations. And again, what you don't know can hurt you. So find out as much as you can within the workplace. And to leave you all with a summary of what we discussed today. It's, every day you're in the process of building a leadership role that you work in. You're rooted. It's been rooted from the day you were born to the end of your life cycle. And it's just about being respectful, servicing, being a servant leader, providing justice, honesty, and building that community. Again, respecting others and listening to them. I encourage you to have written policies regarding relationship with vendors as well. I find some of those things at times with kickbacks, a bit unethical, or whether it's a club and there's no tipping involved, but there's still tipping, accepting. So think about some of those practices that are in place now. If you're going to have those policies in place, make sure that everyone follows it. There's no favoritism in anyone. And implement a code of ethics policy. What a great way to start off, with an ethics, a code of ethics policy to ensure that everyone understands that they can, if they're uncomfortable with someone, they can come, they can go to their manager or someone else whom they feel more comfortable with, that they don't feel that they're going to be retaliated against in any way or discriminated in any way. So just a few little tidbits for the, as we conclude this. I thank you, each one of you. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned a little bit about your style, who you are, and then that you can use some of those tools to better your departments and staff as well. But thank you, everyone.
Yeah. And real quick, we have a few questions. So
Okay.
Rob said, where do you stand on questioning a superior based on what you know to be right?
You have to use your own judgment and where you stand on that yourself too, and how superior is it. Sometimes, if I'm referencing to a president of a club or the board, it's tough. I can tell you, I know that because I see that with a lot of the GMs and some of the challenges that they face in their positions, and sometimes it costs them their jobs as well too. So like I said, it really depends on whom you are working with, and if someone else can help you and justify the reason, support you in that conversation and open up the dialogue, sometimes that might be helpful instead of being alone.
And another one from Jim. How best do you handle entitled younger employees when they demand benefits that they perceive that they are owed?
Oh, it must be the Gen Z or Y now, because they all are doing that at this point. Now, everyone, it's funny because I see that more often with the new generation, which is Gen Z at this time. And they're expecting more benefits or expecting what we're seeing with the unions and as it is, everybody has to be treated the same as it, and you have to almost explain to them the cost of some of those benefits as well too. But if you're using, going back, if you're using a summary, if you're using a summary of what they're receiving for the day, for the year, not just their comp, but also their benefits and their total comp. Show them that it's just not that one part. Do you use that a summary of compensation? Maybe that's might be something to add and show them.
One other thing was Joanne asked if you had an example code of ethics sample policy.
Yes, I do. I have many, and you can use it as you choose to. There's many of them out there, but I always one of the things I use is I make sure that the site that I use is valuable, such as like a SHRM or an HFTP, that I know that the information that they provide has been reviewed by attorneys, has been approved by the board. Those I don't just go to. That's why during these slides I reference to a lot of things where I get my information, because at the end of the day that is called plagiarism, right? So what I would say, I would send you one from SHRM. If not, if you don't have access to that, I would be happy to send it to Brittany and she can forward over.
Absolutely. And then everyone else, I mean, there's been some great comments in the chat, Claire, of just people's takeaways and just thanking you for the presentation. Some people said time flew by.
I know. I'm so sorry I went over.
It really did. So yes, thank you so much, Claire. We appreciate it. Yeah. And again, this will be, it is recorded, so it'll be up on our website. I will let everyone know when it is there if they want to reference back to it. Claire, if there's anything you want to send to me to send out to the group from takeaways, let me know.
Yep.
And yes, thank you all so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
And I hope to see everyone in Indianapolis in a couple of weeks. Right?
Annual convention is right around the corner. Yep. So hopefully everyone is registering for that. If you have questions about that event, feel free to reach out to me. Claire could probably answer your questions too. So just let us know if you have any questions.
We definitely look forward to seeing everybody in Indianapolis to obtain your certificates for this amazing leadership session.
Yes. And I'll be sending out an email with more information about that actually right after this. So thank you for reminding me, Jim. Appreciate it.
Yep. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I really
Awesome.
enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit today and you had some takeaways.